So in this presentation today, I'll really just hone in on some of the specific steps that contribute to the overall vision for ELSA. So just to take us back over what we've accomplished over the past few days, we've had the chance to start to get a sense of what this project is about. So we've heard the overall vision for the project, we've heard from the national team how it plans to use the maps we create together to support national priorities. And we've also had an introduction to the principles behind the science that we will use to create the Essential Life Support Area map. The science is called systematic conservation planning. Today is our chance to really go deeper into the process, so all of you are on the same page with us and understand the different steps of the process and how we'll work together to create this Essential Life Support Area map. Throughout this first workshop and throughout the project as a whole, we'll count on all of you as our national experts to guide us about what the strategic priorities are, what spatial data you already have, and what's needed in your country to ensure that the data and maps we create through this project can actually be used to support diverse organizations in the implementation of their goals. So one metaphor we love to use to describe the ELSA process is cooking. Our very first pilot country was Costa Rica. And when we explained to then Minister of Environment and Energy, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, about our vision for creating a map of Costa Rica's essential life support areas, he said, "Oh, that's the big enchilada. It's everything all rolled up into one." And so our cooking metaphor began. So this is a little bit silly, but it also provides us with an easy and accessible way to talk about this project and to show how it reflects national context. Plus, after a year of virtual meetings and quarantines, we all need a little bit more to laugh about. So over the course of next week, we'll be working with you to identify the flavors you want to come to life in your dish. We'll do this by identifying the policy goals and targets you want to achieve with your Essential Life Support Area map for Haiti. During the data hackathon, we'll also work with you to identify the key ingredients, the national spatial data that you already have that can help us to create the best Essential Life Support Area map for Haiti. So during this presentation, I'll take you through the recipe for how we get from where we are now to the final Essential Life Support Area map for your country. So here you can just see an overview of all of the different steps. Today I'm going to take you through each of these quickly, answer any questions you have, and get your impressions about the project as a whole. Our first step is focused on working with you to identify your priority policies. We worked with the core project team to identify key policy documents related specifically to nature, climate change, and sustainable development. We then carefully surveyed these policies to identify targets and goals within them that were nature-based. And we combined all of these nature-based targets in a single Google Sheet. During the upcoming policy hackathon, we'll work together with you to identify which of these targets have the potential to be mapped. Another way to think about this is which targets can be supported through spatial data, where maps can help us to achieve them. Once we have that list of all of the nature-based mappable targets, we'll then work with you to identify the 10 most important targets to strategic priorities. These targets will serve as the foundation for our ELSA analysis, and our final ELSA map will show how actions to protect, manage, and restore nature can best achieve these 10 priority targets. The second step of our recipe identifies national and global spatial data to guide the ELSA analysis. So during our upcoming data hackathon, you'll work with our science team to identify data that highlights, sorry, to identify existing national spatial data that can help us to map your 10 priority targets. So this can be existing national data, or it can be any existing global data layers that you feel fills data gaps at the national level. So this data selection step is very important because these input data sets will be instrumental in creating your final ELSA map. So I just want to stress here, as we're not trying to throw out everything that's been done before. Those, in fact, will be essential to helping us make sure that this map best reflects reality on the ground. And we'll count on all of you to help us identify which existing spatial data sets are the most important to include here. So for our third step of the recipe, we'll work to create what we call opportunity maps for nature, climate change, and sustainable development. You might also have heard these called heat maps. So to create these maps, we'll use GIS software to visualize the spatial data layers we chose in step 2 and determine where they overlap. We'll then use GIS algorithms to identify high-value locations that indicate opportunities for nature, climate change, and sustainable development in your country. These maps start to provide us with a sense of areas that could be important for the policy targets you selected. In step 4, we'll review and revise these opportunity maps with your national experts. We'll use their knowledge to identify what areas appear as important but are not, what areas do not appear as important but are, and what national data sets might be needed to fill these gaps. So once that we've verified that we have the right data included to reflect the priorities identified by your country, we'll then start the work of producing our Essential Life Support Area Action Map. To produce this action map, we need to know 2 things. The first is the total amount of land area that your country has committed to protection, restoration, and management. We also need to understand where those actions can be taken in your country based on zoning. So for example, you couldn't protect in the middle of a large urban center, but you might be able to restore small areas of greenery. In step 6 of the recipe, we set the parameters for our optimization model. So here we need to do 2 things. First, we need to weight each of the spatial data sets based on the priority of the policy target they are representing. And second, we need to assess the potential impact that each nature-based action can have on achieving that policy target. So for example, management might have a much higher impact on targets related to food security than on targets related to climate change mitigation. This step enables us to discuss and identify the different impacts of these actions, as well as the overall importance of the different policy targets that we're trying to achieve. So step 7 is where everything comes together, and we'll do this together with you in our second project workshop. So in this step, we use the software Prioritize R to do our cooking. We know from step 1 the flavors we want, which are the policy targets that is identified as those they want to achieve. We know from step 2 the ingredients we have, the global and national spatial data layers. And we know from steps 5 and 6 how to measure these ingredients. Prioritizer puts all of this together to create the most delicious dish possible, or the best Essential Life Support Area map. In the optimization model that's run by Prioritize R, the nature-based actions we identified are the means to our goal of achieving all our policy targets. We know from step 5 how much land can be allocated to each of these actions and where they can take place. And we want to use these actions to achieve the greatest benefit across all of our priority policy targets. We also know from step 6 the relative priority of each target and the degree to which each action can help to achieve it. A central part of this analysis is bringing together different stakeholder groups, such as all of you gathered here today, to help us to understand the different goals related to nature, climate change, and sustainable development in your country. So we'll ensure that once we arrive at an initial essential life support area map, that we integrate all of your feedback to make sure that it reflects realities on the ground and can chart a path forward to meeting diverse priorities. Once we have the final essential life support area map for your country, we'll then work to develop a set of recommendations about how this map can actually be used for implementation to achieve the 10 priority policy targets. As part of the support offered by this project, we'll also provide you with access to new dynamic data and indicators that can help you to measure the impact of actions taken through application of the ELSA map. So we'll discuss more of these dynamic data and indicators during our second workshop and show how they might be used in your country to track progress. And finally, an essential part of this project from this workshop all the way through to the end will be developing communication materials to share in your country and also to highlight your work on the international stage. We'll also be working to integrate our learnings across all of our different ELSA pilot countries to support the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework of the Convention on Biological Diversity. So throughout this process, we'll be closely working with all of you to incorporate your inputs to guide the process and to make sure that our final essential life support area map really reflects your needs and priorities on the ground, and that your different institutions will be able to use it for action and monitor the impacts of your results.